You may know that over the weekend, the US military conducted an operation in Venezuela that resulted in the capture of Nicolas Maduro. But what you may not know is that oil is at the center of the operation. But don't just take my word for it. President Trump said quote, "We are going to have our very large United States oil companies go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, and start making money for the country." And this is a play right out of the Confessions of an Economic Hitman book. And, he says it's good for it could be good for the people, it could be good for the corporations. I guess we'll find out. And you probably also realize that oil makes the world go round. And it is the largest fuel source, comprising about 33% of the global primary energy. In fact, oil is responsible for nearly 70 to 80% of global transport. It is absolutely vital to the transportation that makes things move around. It's also used for thousands of products like plastics, fertilizers, detergents, paint, medicine, asphalt, rubber, lubricant. Oil is absolutely crucial to any sort of construction or movement of goods. Not to mention, it's huge when it comes to data center construction and energy to power data centers. And guys, on this channel, that's really what we're focusing on, is how is AI changing the world? And we're seeing hundreds of billions of dollars being spent on these projects, and oil is at the center. Venezuela is absolutely crucial. You may not realize this, but you probably actually don't realize how crucial Venezuelan oil is to the globe. Venezuela has one of the largest oil reserves in the world. It's about 17% of the global total. Isn't that amazing? 70% of the oil in the world is sitting there in that reserve in Venezuela. But over the past few years, the output has declined significantly due to sanctions, corruption, mismanagement. It's interesting to me, a lot of the people that are upset about this move, well, maybe if it wasn't Trump, they wouldn't be. But we'll get to that in a minute, because in fact, the Biden administration, Canada, UK, Brazil, Colombia, Argentina, they did not even see Maduro as legitimate head of state. And some of the stories I've heard about Maduro and what he's done down there in Venezuela are absolutely, absolutely horrible. I mean, murdering political dissidents, not having real elections. I mean, it does not sound like a nice place to live. The Venezuelan currency is completely crashed. It's worth almost nothing. I mean, it must be a horrible, horrible place to live. I've lived in South Florida, and all my Venezuelan friends seem very happy that this is occurring. But it's complicated. It's complicated. We'll get to that in a minute. So what I find interesting as well is, we've seen these other countries that don't see Nicolas Maduro as a legitimate head of state. However, there are a few countries that did see him as a head of state and are strongly condemning the actions by the US military. For example, Russia, China, Cuba, Iran, all condemn the move. It's also worth noting that they're all either enemies or adversaries of the United States. Seems kind of funny that that's the way it worked. Quick side note, by the way, on this, I gotta give the US military some props here, because there were over 150 military aircraft, multiple, tons of boats, and then the US Navy was out there. You had Delta Force, the special force operators, the CIA was involved. I mean, they shot the lights out. Like, when you see how many helicopters were involved, air cover from fighter jets, it's unbelievable what the US military was able to do. Not to mention, not one aircraft was disabled or lost, and not one human life was lost, not one US American life. There was gunfire. Venezuela was, maybe ready, and they were trying to stop the US military, but the US military just went in and absolutely creamed them. I mean, say what you want about Trump, but he is, he's he is a wild man, man. He gets out there, gets it done. And what's also interesting to me too, you see a real contrast in what's happened here in the Venezuela versus what happened in the Iraq conflict, where in Iraq, basically they said, hey, we're gonna go and we're gonna get the oil, and it led into a really long, drawn out war. But in this case, we just went in, got their quote leader, and just absolutely creamed them. No long drawn out war. One of the reasons that I kind of more or less, I don't want to say supported Trump, but kind of supported him, is that during his first administration there were no new wars. It was the first president in my lifetime with no new wars. You say what you want, but I think that that's interesting to look at. So this, again, getting back to the countries that weren't a big fan of this move, China being one of them. And there's a big reason for that. China is one of the biggest consumers of Venezuelan oil. China actually gets 41% of Venezuelan oil. Out of every 10 barrels that go out of Venezuela, 4 of them are going to China. Please believe that's not going to be happening now. They got shut out. They got shut down. And this is huge, because it's one of the things we've been talking about on the channel recently, is essentially the US and China are in a massive competition for global dominance, but AI and robotic dominance. And so with China getting shut out of the oil, that's a big play. Now, China has other ways of getting in oil. They get oil from multiple places, including Russia, but they also have nuclear reactors. They're on the forefront of nuclear energy. So China will, I think that they've been planning ahead for this. There are some really smart operators there in China. However, shutting down the Venezuela pipelines to them, or sanctioning, or finding ways to make it more difficult for trying to get that oil is gonna set them back. So this is a huge, complex, extremely complex global issue. Now, one of the things that I find really perplexing, and I'm just gonna give you some opinions of mine. If you disagree with me, you can put them in the comments below. Perfectly fine to do that. We can agree to disagree, or we can agree to agree, or disagree to agree, But what I find perplexing is that over the past years, many countries that have condemned Maduro and failed to see him as legitimate, again, including the Biden administration. I saw a video of Karine Jean-Pierre, the former White House secretary, just coming out and saying, we don't recognize Maduro, he's not right. They even put a $25 million essentially bounty out on Maduro, saying, hey, any information that leads to the capture or arrest of Maduro, $25 million will pay out for it. But what's interesting to me is now a lot of these supporters of the Biden administration have kind of backtracked on that. I mean, even Kamala Harris said, we don't support this. But it's like, hey, what's happened over the last 2 years? Because 2 years ago, you were offering a $25 million bounty. So I don't fully understand that. It's kind of strange. Because I think at the end of the day, guys, what it comes down to is some people just really hate Trump. Really hate him. Really hate him. It seems like, you might approve the policy, but you have to disapprove it because it's him. And honestly, I think that's kind of a weak spot. It kind of makes it hard to take people seriously, I think, when you're so obsessed with hating someone that you can't agree that they do something good. I think I can look across the board, and at least I tell myself this, say, hey, I agree with this action, I don't agree with this action. Everyone has strengths and weaknesses, and I think it's good to call out people on the good and also call them out on the bad. He's so extremely polarizing that, and I get it too. By the way, Trump is a bit of a bully. That's his style. He's a bit of a bully. He has said a lot of things in the past that I don't support. I wouldn't say those types of things. But man, I gotta say, going in there, taking out a guy that the entire world did not like or did not see as legitimate is pretty impressive. Especially this is not a massive drawn out war. This is not, a Ukraine-Russia thing. This is not an Israel-Palestine thing. This is saying, hey, there's a bad dude in there. We're going to go in and we're going to take him out. So anyway, regardless of what you think, clearly a very, very bold move that's going to completely change the global energy structure. My predictions would be, big oil corporations are going to crush it. They're just going to be living their best life. Exxon, Chevron, Conoco, they're going to cash in. I would also expect that over the next several months, you'll see oil prices, especially in the US, drop down, which is certainly crucial toward the midterms, the election midterms coming up here later in 2026. If the Republicans want to hold Congress, it all comes down to the economy, boys. You know it, I know it. It all comes down to the economy. If the economy sucks, they're not going to do well. And bringing in oil, reducing the cost is certainly good for them. Certainly good for them, certainly good for the economy. And I also can clearly state and see that it's going to antagonize other global competitors like China, like Russia. It's just crazy time. I mean, we are like 5 days into 2026 and we have already seen a huge move. Anyway, I wanted to touch in on this. On this channel, we cover AI, automation, how it impacts your job. And I think that the oil prices are going to factor in. It's going to factor into how you're going to remain relevant, respected, and financially free as a man, because there's just energy makes the world go round, boys, as we saw. All right, guys, I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks for watching today. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you there. See ya. Peace.